Um, just to finish up here, I did want to mention something about Martin Luther King. There's a story from the Bible that he often liked to tell when speaking at rallies and giving speeches, etc. And that was about the Good Samaritan. I guess you guys have probably all heard it, where there's a road from Jerusalem to Jericho, and there was a man who was traveling down that road. It's a very dangerous road because it's very steep, going downhill. There are a lot of places for robbers to hide. And this man who was traveling on the road was, basically ambushed by robbers and beaten and almost killed, and his possessions were taken. And then Jesus tells a story of how first a priest comes along and looks at this guy who's, really needs trouble and is laying there half dead on the side of the road, and the priest just passes him by and continues walking. And then a Levite comes along and he does the same thing. He sees the guy laying on the ground, and rather than help him, he just continues on. And then there's a Samaritan who comes along, who a Samaritan in those times was kind of like a second-class citizen. And rather than just continuing to walk past this guy who really needed help and was in a desperate situation, he stopped to help him, put him in his wagon, took him to the nearest inn, gave the innkeeper a couple pieces of silver and said, hey, take care of this guy, and whatever else it costs you to take care of him for as long as he needs, let me know. I'll come back and pay whatever I need to beyond this. And Dr. King, when he shared this story, he made the observation that the priest and the Levite who came and probably just passed this poor fellow by, they probably didn't do it because they hated him or they didn't think he needed help or whatever, but they probably thought to themselves, what might possibly happen to me if I stop and help this guy? Maybe he's not really injured. Maybe he's just faking it and his buddies are, behind the next rock, and as soon as I stop and help them, then they're going to jump out and get me. Or, for whatever reason, they kind of feared the consequences that would come to them for helping this person. And so Dr. King said, instead of thinking you're having that mentality, it's important for us, whether you're Christian or not Christian, I guess, it would seem important for us to think to ourselves instead, what will happen to this person who needs help if I don't help him? And that's maybe the mentality that it's hard to have, because that means that at times we need to sacrifice things, but that's, I think, the attitude that Dr. King would like us to take, and that we should. There's a lot of things here locally that can be done that aren't going to end the war in Iraq or Afghanistan and elsewhere, or give freedom and safety to Palestinians. But there are a few things that we can do. There are many Iraqi refugees here in Salt Lake City who have been resettled here through the International Rescue Committee. They're all having a very difficult time adjusting to life here in Salt Lake. They have a great volunteer program there where you can be of help to these refugees. You could go to Palestine with an organization called the International Solidarity Movement, participate with Palestinians in nonviolent demonstrations against the apartheid wall, for example, which is confiscating Palestinian land, and essentially be there as an international presence to kind of deter the Israeli soldiers from using so much violence to put down these demonstrations. You can give your money. There's a great organization called Islamic Relief that does a lot of very good aid work in Gaza and also in places like Africa, where people are just simply starving and don't have the food that they need. If there's anyone who is thinking about joining the military, convince them that that's not in their best interest to do that. There are job fairs where recruiters for the military here in Utah are looking for people who are down on their luck and don't have money for college or don't have jobs, etc., trying to encourage them to join the military and participate in these wars of aggression overseas. If anyone's interested, there's a group of people down in Provo that have been going to job fairs to try and pass out literature and discourage people from joining the military. When the recruiters are there trying to talk to them, you can come up and talk to me about that if that's something you might be interested in doing. But there are many small things you can do to help fight against the war that may not have a huge effect or be on a very grand scale, but they can make a difference in the lives of individuals. And so I just encourage people, again, there's all these different causes that are so important to support all these environmental things and so forth, but if any those things are interesting, I just thought I'd mention a few ideas to give people. Also, if anyone would like to pick up a Mormon Worker, again, it's just an anti-war newspaper that we publish locally. I've got some copies up here in the front. You're welcome just to come grab one. And I'll let you guys go. Finally, appreciate your patience and sticking around and hearing me talk. So.
Just Mormon Worker is going to tell Mormons that are together, like Mormon Worker meaning like the group of people that are Mormon that are making a difference.
That are trying to, yeah. There's a long tradition of socialist newspapers which have worker in the title. Many of you guys maybe have heard of the Catholic Worker. I read there's the Communist Worker, the Socialist Worker, the Daily Worker, etc. And so just kind of in the tradition of those different newspapers, that's why we named our paper the Mormon Worker. It's a socialist, anti-war newspaper. So in addition to being Mormons who believe in the church and are active in the church that are promoting socialism and anti-war positions based on scripture, the idea is through the newspaper to get people together to do different things, like counter-recruitment for the military, things like that.
I think it's a great
yeah, I mean, there are students at BYU that write for a newspaper. I'm a graduate of BYU, and so, again, we're trying to get these ideas about the environment and being against war, etc., out to a Mormon audience and kind of make it clear to them that there's no contradiction between their beliefs as Mormons and opposing, the Iraq War, for example. That really, as Mormons, these are activities that we should religiously be obligated to participate in. So.
Sorry, one last thing. What do you think, how easily do you think it would be to enlighten people to your ideals in the church? Especially people in Utah.
Well, we're always trying to think of more ways to do it, but when I actually have a chance to sit down and talk to people one-on-one who are maybe very conservative or very pro-war, etc., it's not always the case, but oftentimes once they hear what I have to say, I've been to Iraq, I lived there and worked there for a while, just knowledgeable about the situation, and when you point out scriptures in the Book of Mormon, for example, or in the Bible that support peaceful solutions rather than always resorting to war and killing your neighbors and hating your enemies instead of loving them, people actually are pretty quick to reevaluate what they've been taught previously. Strangely, the support that Mormons give for things like capitalism and war, even though that's the dominant view amongst Mormons here in Utah, it's not as a result of Mormonism per se, it's as a result of other cultural and political factors that have molded people's opinions here. And so once they kind of see the resources within Mormon scripture which say, hey, war is wrong, you can't just go to another country and invade it and kill a couple 100,000 people because you want to have control of their oil resources. But people have just never heard those views articulated, and so once they do, they're like, wow, that really makes sense, I agree with that.
As you leave, I have one final quote from Dr. King, and it really matters right now. He said, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter." So the time for silence has passed. We must raise our voices. We must peacefully uprise. The time is now. Thank you for your time and your attention. Thank you to the speakers and to the organizers of this event. Jobs with Justice would love to have some donations out in the hallway.